Norris Geyser Basin in the snow. It sure looks a little different, doesn't it? This is the last week that the park is open for the so-called summer season. The park generally closes at the start of November. So this is the last week of October. And we've had a decent amount of snow, only 2 snowstorms. Some of the snow, as you can see, is still fresh. It's on the trees. To refresh your memory, there's 2 geyser basins at Norris. You have Porcelain Basin, and then there's Back Basin. Today I'm just going to be doing a portion of Porcelain Basin. Unfortunately, I don't have time to walk around all of Back Basin. You may recall Back Basin. I'll get back to that in a moment. This is a Yellowstone Forever or Forever Yellowstone bookshop where they raise money for the park. I was saying that there's obviously the two geyser basins here, Back Basin and Porcelain Basin, and I don't have time to do Back Basin. Today there's the turnoff to Back Basin. Back Basin probably best known for Steamboat Geyser. If you have a look at another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours, it was on a beautiful summer's day. And gosh, it sure looks different. This is the Norris Museum, which has been closed all season. And straight ahead of us is Porcelain Basin. Notice how off in the distance over there the snow has melted around the thermal areas, which is to be expected, isn't it? Pretty much snow-packed and icy. And there were other cars in the parking lot, but I don't see anybody here at the moment. What I'm really looking forward to is Porcelain Springs, which is one of the spurs that runs off the main boardwalk system through Porcelain Basin. And with it being relatively cold, you can see how all the steam is really accentuated. You see so much more of it. Temperature's not too bad. When I left the car it was 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which is probably about -7 or so Celsius. And that sound that you can hear is a steam vent. I've mentioned to you before. Look at that little bit of water coming out of there. How cool is that? That looks spectacular, doesn't it? I've mentioned to you before that you'll find these steam vents and fumaroles, or fumaroles as they are also known, located on hillsides, and that generally stands to reason because steam vents occur in an area where you still have a source of intense heat, but so much of the water has disappeared. And in the higher up areas, of course, you're not going to find so much water. You can hear that mighty growler steam vent going off. There you go. So nice to be here without hundreds of, if not thousands of other people. Certainly growling at the moment, isn't it? Boy, this trail is slippery. And we'll carry on along the trail. Coming up on our right is that spur to Porcelain Springs, which I always look forward to on a cold, snowy day, because the steam, with any luck, should be all over the place. And ahead of us is the main trail through through Porcelain Basin. My goodness, yeah, there's so much steam. I don't know if we'll be able to see anything. This little spur, this little boardwalk to Porcelain Springs really is one of my favorite parts of Yellowstone. It really does look like you're on another planet, even at times, with all that steam just billowing off. And if you listen carefully, you can hear steam vents, which are also known as fumaroles. I'm going to drop in a map here so you can see where we are. You'll notice that the roads through Yellowstone make up a massive figure of 8. And there's a road that runs from Norris Geyser Basin, where I am, to the east to Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone and Canyon Village, which splits up the two roads, which splits up the massive figure of 8 into two gigantic circles, two huge loops. And Norris Geyser Basin is on the left, on the west side, just where the road split up. Look at all these little thermal features. Those are really cool. I was saying that Norris is the most thermally active part of Yellowstone, and if you refer back to that map that I mentioned, again, you will have noticed that there's a soft purple line that more or less follows the lower loop of the park, and that shows us where the caldera is or was. The caldera is the gigantic hole in the ground that was left the last time the Yellowstone supervolcano erupted, probably about 625,000 years ago. And you'll notice that Norris is just outside the caldera, but it's still the most thermally active part of the park. In addition, what scientists have found really interesting here at Norris is that there's all sorts of changes that take place rapidly. It's not as if changes don't take place elsewhere in the park, and I'll come back to that. Just listen to these sounds. The blue color of that pool is stunning, that somewhat milky blue. I don't mentioned before that this is a really dynamic part of Yellowstone, and right here we are at Porcelain Springs. It's the fastest changing area in the entire basin, and the center that we see is one of the reasons for it. I'd also mention that there were all sorts of changes that take place here at Norris that occur a lot more frequently and a lot more rapidly than elsewhere in Yellowstone. For example, a geyser that hasn't been working suddenly comes back to life, or a hot spring goes dormant, or a geyser starts erupting a lot more frequently, or just doesn't erupt. And this type of activity, or the lack of activity, is what makes Norris so interesting, and scientists are still trying to figure out why it happens so much here compared to elsewhere in Yellowstone. That looks like my little geyser over there. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to pick it up in the steam now. Every time I try and zoom in on it, oh, there it goes. Oh, that looks like a geyser that may be in the steam phase, which I appreciate is a little ironic because all we can see here is steam. The snow is really caked on. And I'm walking back towards the main trail that runs through Porcelain Basin itself. That heads up to the camping area at Norris. This is where the little spur up to Porcelain Springs meets the main boardwalk through Porcelain Basin. This area ahead of us here in the summers has some beautiful bacteria mats. Look at that milky blue color again. But I don't know if the bacteria mats are going to be as visible at this time of the year. I doubt it. That's where we came in. The parking lot is up in that area over there. That boardwalk system ahead of us is what the Park Service completed relatively recently. I think it was 2019. The boardwalk used to stop somewhere over there. As it is, on our tours, this is where we generally stop, just after this little bridge. Once our tour guests have seen the bacteria mats, because there's not an awful lot to see in that area there relative to the rest of Porcelain Basin. If we have a look down, we can still see some of the bacteria mats. This green color here is caused by algae. The colors are not quite as pronounced as normal. What happens with these bacteria mats is that where you've got a source of intense heat, such as in some of these hot springs, there's very few organisms or thermophiles, heat-loving organisms, that are able to survive there. So the colors tend to be blue, which is the color that's naturally reflected back into our eyes anyway. And then as the temperatures cool down, as you get to the edges of the thermal features, so more and more organisms are able to grow, and so the areas become more and more colorful. That yellow that we see over there is sulfur, is caused by sulfur. And that's where I'm going to end this virtual Yellowstone tour, Porcelain Basin, in the winter. Thank you so much for joining me on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. Remember that you can see all of our virtual Yellowstone tours at virtualyellowstonetours.com. That's virtualyellowstonetours.com. If you enjoy this series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, see you in Yellowstone one day.